My name is Sarah, and I am 32 years old. For most of my life, everything had been normal. I had a steady job, a routine, relationships that felt secure. I thought I knew what life was until that night. I boarded the plane, feeling tired from the busy week I had just finished. It was a late flight, and I was looking forward to getting some sleep. The plane felt calm, the air was cool, and the lights were dim. I found my seat, settled in, and buckled my seatbelt. I was ready for the journey, but something felt different that night. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, I tried to push the feeling away. It was just a flight, I told myself. Everything would be fine. I glanced around at the passengers. Most of them were lost in their own world, some reading, some watching movies. And then I saw him. The man sitting by the window, staring out at the sky. He had dark hair and sharp eyes. Something about him caught my attention. It was more than just his looks. It was the way he was sitting so still, almost too still, like he was waiting for something, but I didn't think much of it. I turned away and closed my eyes, trying to get some rest. But then I heard a voice. "Excuse me, miss." I opened my eyes and looked up. It was the man. He was looking at me. His gaze was calm, but there was something strange about his eyes. A coldness. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice smooth, "but I've been following the news. There's a storm in New York. It might delay our flight." I nodded politely, though I wasn't really paying attention to him. I just wanted to close my eyes again and forget about everything. But something about the way he spoke, it felt like he wasn't just talking about the weather. It felt like he was trying to tell me something. "Thanks for the update," I said, my voice quiet. I thought I should say something, but I didn't know what. Then I leaned in a little closer. His voice dropped, barely a whisper. "You don't know it yet," he said, "but you're in danger." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at him, unsure of how to react. What was he talking about? "Someone you love," he continued, his eyes dark, "is going to die tonight." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt the blood drain from my face. What was happening? This wasn't normal. Why was he saying this? My mind raced, trying to process his words. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice barely coming out. His smile was cold. It didn't reach his eyes. "You heard me," he said. "Someone you love will die, and it will be because of you." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I felt a chill run down my spine. I looked around the plane. No one seemed to notice. Everyone was busy with their own things. The hum of the plane filled the silence. I turned back to the man, trying to make sense of what he said, but I couldn't. His eyes were cold, distant. This wasn't a joke. He wasn't playing around. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking now. He leaned back in his seat, his arms folded across his chest, as though he had all the time in the world. "I'm not here to scare you," he said. "I'm here to warn you." "Warn me about what?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He leaned back in his seat, he said calmly. He leaned back in his seat, "Or someone close to you will die." My stomach twisted. My hands were shaking. I could feel the fear building inside me. I looked at him, trying to understand. Why was he doing this? "Who was he? What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me, his eyes locked onto mine. Finally, he spoke. "I want you to make a choice," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "A choice," I repeated, confused. "Yes," he said. "If you don't do what I say, your father will die." My heart stopped. My father? I hadn't even thought about him. He was miles away, at home in California. He was safe, I told myself. "He's in danger right now," the man continued. "And it's because of you." My mind was racing. What did he mean? How could this be happening? "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're lying. There's no way." But he didn't flinch. He just stared at me. "Do you want your father to die?" he asked, his voice cold. I felt a knot in my throat. I didn't know what to say. "I'm not lying," he said, leaning closer. "If you don't do what I say, your father will die tonight." I felt dizzy. I could barely think straight. My mind was spinning with fear and confusion. I had no idea what was going on, but one thing was clear. I was trapped. And the man sitting across from me had all the power. I couldn't breathe. His words echoed in my mind, louder than the hum of the plane. "Your father will die tonight." I turned away from the man, my thoughts racing. It didn't make sense. How could he know anything about my father? How could he be so certain? I clutched the armrest, my hands trembling. Was I dreaming? Was this some kind of sick joke? But the man didn't look like he was joking. His expression remained cold, unreadable, his eyes still locked on mine. I forced myself to speak, though my voice barely reached above a whisper. "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. He just kept staring, as if studying me, watching my every reaction. "I'm someone who can change your life," he said finally. "Someone who can make them stop happening." His words made no sense. What did he mean? How could he change my life? I turned my head, glancing quickly at the other passengers. No one seemed to notice. No one seemed to care. Was I the only one who could hear this? Could they be in on it? The thought made my stomach churn. I couldn't keep my eyes on him any longer. I stared down at my lap, trying to steady my breathing. I had to think. There had to be a reason for all of this. I don't believe you, I said, though even I could hear the fear in my voice. He smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was cold, calculating, like he already knew what I would say. I'm not asking you to believe me, Sarah, he said, using my name as though he knew everything about me. I'm just asking you to choose. Choose. What kind of choice was this? I tried to clear my head, but everything was spinning. My father's face flashed in my mind. I saw his smile, his laugh, the way he held me close when I was younger. He had always been there for me, but now? Was he in danger? I looked back at the man, my heart pounding in my chest. You want me to choose, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. But how? He leaned back in his seat, looking relaxed, almost as if he were enjoying the way my mind was racing. Very simple, he said softly. You have to decide if you want your father to live. If you do, you'll do exactly as I say. Or what? Or your father dies, he said. You think it's a coincidence that we're on the same plane? That we're sitting right next to each other? I couldn't reply. My mind was a blur. How could this be happening? Was I really about to lose my father? The thought made my chest tighten, and I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The man didn't seem to care about my panic. He just waited, letting the tension build. The flight attendants came down the aisle, but they didn't look in our direction. I tried to get their attention, but no one seemed to notice my distress. It felt like I was invisible, but I wasn't invisible to him. I'm serious, he said, his voice dropping even lower. This is not a game. If you don't do what I say, your father's blood will be on your hands. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure, but my throat felt tight. My father, how could I let anything happen to him? I thought about calling my mom, or even a friend, anyone who could help me. But my phone was in my bag, far from reach. And something told me that calling for help wasn't going to make a difference. Please, I said, my voice shaking. I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me what you need from me. He paused for a moment, as if deciding whether I was truly ready to make the decision. Good, he said, his voice calm. I need you to listen very carefully, Sarah. I need you to go into the cockpit and tell the pilot to turn the plane around. What? My heart skipped a beat. No, I said quickly. I can't do that. That's insane. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You think I'm playing a game? He asked, his voice suddenly harsh. Your father is in danger right now? You think you have time to question me? You don't. I felt my breath catch in my throat. His words hit me like a slap. I couldn't think straight. Was he right? You don't have much time? He said, the plane will land soon, and you'll lose your chance. If you want to save your father, you'll do exactly as I say. You'll go to the cockpit and you'll get the pilot to change course. No, I said again, more firmly this time. I can't do that. This is insane. He sat back, watching me carefully. You think you have a choice? He asked, his voice almost pitying. You don't. I control what happens next. I decide whether you win or lose, whether your father lives or dies. I swallowed, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had no choice, but I couldn't make myself do it. I couldn't risk everything. And yet, if I didn't, my father would die. The weight of the decision crushed me, and I could barely breathe. I turned away from him, my hands shaking. The flight was already descending, and the lights of the airport below were getting closer. The fear was overwhelming. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise. I couldn't lose him. I just couldn't. If you liked my story, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.